Let me just get some. Okay, he's pointing at me. I think I'm hearing something from the speaker. Good. You know, as I was preparing for this, I realized how much I preferred it in the room with a desk, everybody in the circle. I feel up here I'm supposed to do tricks and be a performer rather than sharing in the study. But we have what we have, and we will rejoice in it. Are there any special prayer requests, praises, requests? I'll pass on that Linda ran into Greg Gimble yesterday, and he has some good news to report that Jeff is coming along. He's up and walking around. Reconstructive surgery is progressing. Things are going well. He was out here briefly and is heading back out to Seattle, and Karen is staying out there. And yeah.
And to add on that, he is starting to talk now, able to talk, and made his mom cry last night saying, "I love you, Mom."
That is touching.
Yeah.
That is very touching. And we just don't know what God has in mind, but we know it's certainly very good and better than we can imagine. And that's wonderful. I thought that the topic for today is very appropriate because I've had a horrible week. Our office is totally without any registered nurses, and so it takes about an hour extra time getting everything done every day. And my high point came yesterday. It was really a small thing, but I was supposed to be doing a Zoom teleconference with the Maine CDC about immunizations, and I had absolutely no time between morning patients, Zoom, and afternoon patients. And the hospital has a website where you can order food from the cafeteria, and they'll bring it up, and one of the staff was going to do that. I went to order it, and it wouldn't let me specify a day and time. Nothing was there. And so finally I called Nutrition Services, and they say, "Oh, sorry, we're not able to do that today. We're down employees, and there are only 2 of us working today." Fortunately, my wonderful dear wife was at TJ Maxx getting something, and she stopped at Subway and got some lunch and brought it to me. Because without that, I would have starved to death. You know, and the whole topic this week about rest, come unto me, yokes, I think that's something that we all desperately need. But let's have a word of prayer before we begin. Almighty God, you love us beyond any comprehension that we can have. Help us so we can appreciate your love. Help us to see your will, your way, because you have things planned far beyond what we can imagine, how wonderful they will be. We praise you for the progress that Jeff has made. Please be with him. Help him that he can grow from this experience, that he can do well. Give Greg and Karen strength. Help them that they can be there and support Jeff. You know, we honor Karen for the work that she has done with others and that she's able to do for her son. Thank you for letting us see that, and praise you for giving her that capability. Please help us all as we're working, as we're going about our day-to-day activities, to put the first things first, our relationship with you. Please be with us in our study. Help us that we can come near in your name, amen. All right. Well, pretty good. The back 3 rows are completely empty. Thank you for coming near. All right. So I find a little bit of a challenge to basically spend the entire lesson on 3 verses. But wow, what a bunch of 3 verses there are. You know, and so I would encourage you to turn to Matthew 11. I've been using my computer, so I have to get it here in my Bible in front of me. So Matthew 11, we'll take a quick look at Matthew 11 and then concentrate on 28 to 30. I appreciated how in the lesson it talked about Matthew 11 as kind of a turning point. And in the first part of Matthew 11, Jesus has some unpleasant things to say. Did you notice that? Did you read that? That he was talking about what happened to some of the local towns because they didn't listen. You compare that with during the triumphal entry to Jerusalem. He stopped and looked over Jerusalem. And what did he say about Jerusalem then? Was he bringing down curses on Jerusalem? Was he threatening the people of Jerusalem? You said a great one. What was he doing?
Stating the facts the way it was.
Yeah, stating the facts.
He was grieving.
He was grieving because he saw what was there and could see what would be there and was mourning. And the imagery of a mother hen gathering her chicks under her. That is so sweet. It was so cute. I got up early Wednesday morning and took my dog for a walk. We went about a mile. Never got more than a couple thousand feet from our house. And on the way back, first I heard the bullfrogs croaking in the pond. They sound so funny. Walked a little bit further around the corner, and there were two mother turkeys with two little turkettes scurrying down the driveway. Oh, they were so cute. And then all of a sudden there's a crash. Bang, through the woods. And two fairly good-sized deer went crashing through. And, it was just so beautiful. But just the imagery that God used, or Jesus used, of wanting to gather Jerusalem under his wings to protect them. That's a universal feeling for him. He wants to do that to all of us. But not always do they want to go under the wing. We sometimes go running away. But if you look in Matthew 11, verse 20, then Jesus began to denounce the cities in which most of his miracles had been performed because they did not repent. Now, interesting, what do you know about the miracles in Chorazin? That's exactly what I knew about it too. Nothing. There's nothing written about it. You look at the end of the Gospel of John, who, paraphrasing very loosely, he talks about, these are just a few of the things. If we wrote down everything Jesus did, the world could not contain all of the books. And, it gets frustrating trying to read the Bible when there's so much that isn't there that we would like to have there. But Chorazin, now we do know about Bethsaida, right? There are a few things about that. If the miracles that were performed in you had been performed in Tyre and Sidon, what were Tyre and Sidon?
Gentile cities.
What?
Gentile cities.
Major cities, port cities, they're still there. So if the miracles had been performed in Tyre and Sidon, what would they have done? They would have repented. Long ago in sackcloth and ashes. But I tell you, it will be more bearable for Tyre and Sidon on the day of judgment than for you. And you, Capernaum, okay, what's special about Capernaum?
That was sort of home base for Jesus.
Yeah.
Peter's hometown.
Yeah. That was where he got up and read from Isaiah, told him, this day this is fulfilled with you. And how did they embrace his message?
Throw him off a cliff.
Yeah, they tried to throw him off a cliff for that. So, Capernaum, will you be lifted up to the skies? No, you will go down to the depths. If the miracles that were performed in you had have been performed in Sodom, what was Sodom notable for?
Every wickedness.
So would you say that was the biblical equivalent of Las Vegas?
Yeah.
No, it was worse. Sorry, one of my cousins was pastoring a church in Las Vegas. And his wife. It's kind of strange. I have two cousins that are ministers married to Adventist ministers. But it would have remained to this day, because what happened to Sodom? Yeah, totally destroyed. I tell you, it would be more bearable for Sodom on the day of judgment than for you. Why was that? That sounds pretty harsh. He's talking about Jewish cities, centers of Jewish learning, and it'll be easier on Tyre, Sidon, and Sodom in the judgment than it will be on them. Because there's a lesson in there for us today.
They had seen Christ the Savior in person and had rejected him.
Yeah.
Of whom much is given, much is expected.
I was going to say, they were responsible for what they knew.
Yeah, they knew more than the...
They had the scriptures of the time.
Yeah. Boy. Do you find that a little scary?
Yeah.
You know, the bar is higher for us because we know more. We've been given more opportunity. I'm fond of repeating something that I read. The ultimate F word is fair. But it's not fair. Any of you heard that from the kids? And the response is, so?
Life isn't fair.
Yeah. But is it all bad news that we know more? Pretty good news. It's pretty good news that we know more. We have more knowledge, more ability. I was listening to a biblical scholar a little while ago, and he was pointing out that the average freshman student taking one of his Bible classes has access to more resources than he had when he was a graduate student in theology. You know, just an explosion and availability of good information. Mixed in is a whole bunch of bad information too. But, you know, we have the opportunity. A very moving experience for me a few years ago was took the kids and went to the Science Museum in Boston. They had a traveling exhibition on the Dead Sea Scrolls. And that was just fantastic to look at that, thinking that these were documents from the era of Jesus. And the one that really sent shivers down my spine, do you all know about Masada?
Yes.
Okay, the Masada, Herod's big palace on top of a cliff, and the Jewish rebels had retreated to Masada, and that was where they were hanging out. And the Romans spent several months building a ramp so that they could get everybody and everything up the cliff, and overran Masada. And the history was, at the end, they all committed suicide. But that there were a group left, and they cast lots as to who would stab and kill whom. And in the exhibition there, they had a pottery shard that had those names on it. They think that was the original from Masada. That just sent shivers down my spine to think about that. To read about the fact that they have found a portion of the Gospel of John, that they have dated the document to having been written in 127 AD. So 35 years after John's death. You know, we are now able to accumulate, collate, distribute vast amounts of information and build knowledge, you know, generation upon generation without losing the old, adding to it. A tremendous advantage that we have, but it comes with a responsibility to recognize, to use that information. Okay, now to the heart of the lesson. Let's read this together. Whatever version you have, let's just read it together in a beautiful cacophony of noise. Matthew 11, and we'll read verses 27, I'll get this straight. 28, 29, and 30. I'll blame it on the lousy eye doctor that I went to that didn't give me the right prescription. No, actually, these are 1.5-year-old glasses, nothing new. Okay, let's start with verse 28, and let's just read it together. We'll read it slowly. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Anybody hear that before? You know, it's got to be right up there in the all-time favorite biblical texts because it speaks to each of us in modernity. Anyone here get tired? Anyone here get weary? Anybody feel heavily laden? And what's Jesus' response for those people? Okay, let's start with the first word there. Come. Oh shoot, Roberta's not here. I was planning on picking on the English teacher. Okay, so what kind of word is come in that context? Imperative. What does that mean? It's been a while since I took an English class.
You must.
You must. Get out here. Do it right now. There is no subject. The subject is implied. You could put in parentheses in front of it, you. Why does Jesus say that? Why does Jesus say here, come to me? I'm sorry.
We might not come otherwise.
Yeah?
It's an action that we have to do. I mean, it is a decision. We either run away, or we go to, or we stand still.
The why, though, is
And
that we
so
need it.
It's an action verb.
Very, very much so.
It also shows that he is quite willing for us to come to him. He is available for us when he says come.
For quite a few hundred years, we've had a big debate about the role between faith and works. Might even say about 2,000 years, and it even predates New Testament times. Do we have to do something in order to be saved?
We have to come.
And that's about it. You have to come. You have to be there. You have to accept it. And then do you have to do anything else? And come back again. Because you're going to slip. But he will accept you every time you come.
But Larry, it's a decision we make up here.
Yeah.
It's something that comes from inside our minds
Yeah.
of what we're going to do.
And you have to come and accept. Now, all ye who are heavily laden. When at the end of the day, I look at my computer desktop and I see 10 phone calls to return, 6 to 10 camp and school physical forms that I have to verify and sign, I feel heavily laden. Probably almost more so than if I'm hauling rocks around. And you just feel that way. And, with our shortages at work, everybody having to do more. Anybody here in the same situation? That there's not enough help to get the work done the way it should be? Did you notice that the 7-Eleven store is closed on Main Street? Yeah, at the corner of Main and Pleasant Street. You go up the front, it says temporarily closed. A big sign, looking for workers, pay up to $18 an hour. It's closed because they can't find people to do it. It finally closed because I think it was the two owners of the franchise were covering the store 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 2 people. Okay, I'm not a great fan of 7-Eleven, but they serve a role in our community. Or one of the convenience stores, they had to close their grill because they couldn't find workers.
It's the same everywhere right now.
Well, David?
It's the same everywhere right now.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to figure out why, but
That's it.
it's tough. You know, I'm glad I'm not looking for a job, but there's plenty of jobs available. Maine Health announced a week ago that they were raising their minimum wage by $3 an hour just to try and get staff. You know, we don't have any nurses right now because one had surgery, one's having a baby, one quit to go somewhere else, and one was on vacation. We called weeks ago to the float pool. Nobody there. Nobody available. Okay, is it a big deal? Not really. We will deliver the care, but you know, we can't find enough people to do the job. And we're heavily laden by this. You know, I'm really discouraged this week with the news coming out about the coronavirus and how there were like 500 people, I forgot to recheck it, in Provincetown that had already been immunized that were shedding Delta variant coronavirus after the 4th of July. It's not nearly as good looking for this fall now as it was a month ago. And, you know, we may be having to look at wearing masks again when we come to church. You know, all of these things that were so aggravating, but I want to stay healthy and I want to keep other people as healthy as possible. So, what are the hardest burdens to bear? For me, at least, the hardest burden to bear is feeling like I let somebody down, somebody near and dear to me. And you keep going back through your mind, if only we had have done this, this could have been prevented. I had an opportunity to help somebody, and I was too concerned about whether I could get my Subway sandwich. You know, that's something that I think each of us, as we think about, we can think we could do better. You're right, we could, but we also wouldn't be in need of a Savior then, would we? If we were perfect. Heavily.
The hardest burden is to be doing it alone, because there is so much that I can't do if I'm only relying on me. There's the word yoke. It means that you're bonded with, you're connected, and you can't break free unless that yoke is lifted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We'll get into yokes some more. Some interesting things that I found on that. But yeah, being alone, working by yourself, not meeting the expectations, you know, it really bothers me when a patient calls to complain that I didn't do the right thing for them. You know, sometimes it's because I didn't pay enough attention, because I was too rushed. Yeah, that hurts, because I was not doing what I want to do. That I was unable for whichever reason. So we've got lots of burdens, and we move on to what do we do with the burdens? Well, that's where the yoke comes in. Anybody here work with oxen? Yeah, I wish so. I know Rob Souza in some of our meetings has talked about his working with horses and working after the horses, cleaning things up. but I just don't have experience being around oxen. But that's historically what we think of with yoke. Do you put a yoke on one ox? Yeah. And what's the yoke for? Hold them together.
Combined effort.
They gotta work together.
Combined effort, work together. Well, what else is the yoke for?
They're,
Peter.
you yoke, whether it's a horse or an oxen, together. You put the strongest one with a weak one.
Yeah. Okay, there's a great sermon in that, Peter. I'm not ready to give it, but it's a great one. I have enjoyed over the years the daily Bible study series by William Barclay. I don't know if any of you have done that, but he was a Scottish theologian, and he viewed himself not as a fancy theologian, but as a middleman, taking theology and making it understandable to every man. And he wrote some wonderful things here about the yoke. Let me just find it. I forgot to have my marker in here. It's kind of funny. I found a marker in this book, a 5-year-old bulletin from our church welcoming Pastor Andre Erasmus, who would be preaching for the first time the next week. That's what was on my bookshelf. Okay. Jesus invites us to take his yoke upon our shoulders. The Jews used the phrase, the yoke, for entering into submission to. They spoke of the yoke of the law, the yoke of the commandments, the yoke of the kingdom, the yoke of God. But it may well be that Jesus took the words of his invitation from something much nearer home than that. He said, my yoke is easy. The word easy is in Greek Christos, which can mean well-fitting. In Palestine, ox yokes were made of wood. The ox was brought, the measurements were taken, the yoke was then roughed out, and the ox was brought back to have the yoke tried on. The yoke was carefully adjusted so that it would fit well and not gall the neck of the patient beast. The yoke was tailor-made to fit the ox. There's a legend that Jesus made the best ox yokes in all Galilee, and that from all over the country men came to him to buy the best yokes that skill could make. In those days as now, shops had their signs above the door, and it has been suggested that the sign above the door of the carpenter's shop in Nazareth may well have been, my yokes fit well. It may be that Jesus is here using a picture from the carpenter's shop in Nazareth where he had worked throughout the silent years. Jesus says, my yoke fits well. What he means is, the life I give you is not a burden to gall you. Your task is made to measure, to fit you. Whatever God sends us is made to fit our needs and our abilities exactly. Jesus says that my burden is light. As a rabbi had it, my burden is become my song. It's not that the burden is easy to carry, but is laid on us with love. It is meant to be carried in love, and love makes even the heaviest burden light. When we remember the love of God, we know that our burden is to love God and to love men. Anybody hear that phrase before? We've really been pushing hard on that as being the motto and vision of our church. There is an old story, and it's kind of funny because I remember from my teens a song built upon this story. Old story that tells how a man came upon a little boy carrying a still smaller boy who was lame upon his back. That's a heavy burden for you to carry, said the man. That's not a burden, came the answer. That's my wee brother. The burden which is given in love and carried in love is always light. That's right. Oh, this is the Daily Study Bible series. He has 2 volumes for Matthew, and I forget, it's about 25 volumes for the entire New Testament. But I love that insight. I don't know that there was a sign above Jesus' carpenter shop door that said, "My yokes fit well." But it gives you a wonderful image to think about. I can't imagine Jesus being anything other than the consummate carpenter. Some of the apocryphal books will talk about how when Jesus made a mistake, he would just pull and magically stretch the wood to be the right shape. Those are a little ridiculous. But
Harry, you don't need a sign above the carpenter. Word gets out.
word gets out, absolutely, Alice. But the idea,
This young, Jesus in Nazareth, he made it, and word goes forth, and it's the same way. I mean, it's the same way with our lives or our actions. It goes out.
well, back before I got old, when I was younger and more energetic, I used to do quite a bit of backpacking and mountain climbing. And the closest that I can come to the yoke analogy is a poorly fit backpack. And that can be so miserable. And
When you're done.
yeah, it can so miserable, and just, adjusting the straps, a little extra padding, moving the load around so that you're better balanced and you don't topple face first if you lean forward. All of those things go into it. And again, I think that's a fairly apt analogy for a yoke, except, I never did try carrying a backpack along with someone else. But, there were a few times where we'd swap our loads around a bit, even things out, all of those things.
I don't know if it's like this for everyone, but often there's like one sentence in the lesson that really catches me.
Mm-hmm.
And this week, it was on Monday, and I'll read it in a second, but if you think about, I think about my friends, several friends, who you're self-confessed very heavily laden, and I know others are, and so you're already overburdened, and now you're supposed to come to Jesus and take a yoke upon you, and it sounds almost more onerous, right? But the lesson said, we are not carrying his yoke. We are just yoked to him because his yoke is easy and his burden is light.
Yeah.
It's not, that just struck me. We are not carrying his yoke.
That's a core principle for what we're studying this week, that we are not carrying the load. We're there with him. And I just love that concept. The yoke is easy. That means it fits. It was designed for me. I saw another quote this week about how, God does give us more than we can handle. You hear people all the saying, well, just remember, God will only give you what you can handle. No, he gives us more than we can handle, and then gives us resources to handle it. That he is there with us. And, I look around, and I've known many of you dear people for quite a few decades, and can remember all kinds of different situations that we have been in. And I can also remember dead ends, cliffs that we felt like we had fallen off of. And guess what? He arranged for us to land at the bottom of the cliff, a way around the wall, a way through the wall, or finding out that the wall was not the way we needed to go. All of those things. So what are we supposed to do when we get this yoke? Oh, take my yoke upon you, learn from me. Interesting, that's the third imperative in this section. We're supposed to come, take, and learn. What are we supposed to learn from taking the yoke?
How to be obedient.
How to be obedient?
We don't lead.
We don't which?
We don't lead.
We don't lead. Yeah, yoke can be tough if the persons under the yoke are going in different directions. Peter?
The stronger of the two teaches the younger what to do.
Peter, you've been on this planet for a few excursions around the solar center, right? Have you done any teaching? Yeah. As a matter of fact, I was really touched at the memorial service for Myron Kruger when the president of the medical staff at Midcoast Hospital wrote a tribute to Myron. Do you all remember that? He said, I came and worked with Myron as a new, just out of residency physician, and I learned so much from him. Each of us in everything that we do are teaching people. Now, I know a few people that the best lesson I can get from them is how not to do things. And hopefully I haven't been that lesson for too many people. But we're supposed to learn from Jesus. What do we learn? How do we learn? Most effective learning is watch and do.
We have to be focused on him all the time.
Yeah. You don't learn by ignoring. Anybody here ever had teachers that were being ignored by the students? A fairly valueless experience for everyone.
Watchman Nee says that you learn about God when you, quote, do business with God.
Okay?
Which implies prayer. I don't know, how do you do business with God? Is yoking with him any different?
Yeah. And you know, one of my big frustrations right now is how little time alone I get with my wife. And we're up to our ears in our day-to-day activities and teaching and caring, that we might get maybe 15, 20 minutes a day, that there's not somebody eagerly listening into what we're saying. And it's tough. No, not quite. And
Take the dog out for a walk more.
yeah, but she didn't come with me. The dog liked it though. Oh, he was great. But you know, that's another one of the old sayings that I liked was, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Or a guy named Dwight David Eisenhower said, no plan of battle survives first contact with the enemy. He also said,
Birthing plan
yeah.
in OB.
Okay, what Tammy is referring to is many mothers and fathers come in with a multi-page document of how they want things to happen at their baby's birth. And we would jokingly say, the longer the plan, the higher the likelihood of a C-section.
Yes.
Eisenhower also said, I believe, that you should plan before battle and then throw the plan away.
It's in Proverbs,
I can just barely hear you.
Is prepared against the day of battle, but safety is a
Yeah. You know, we've got a lot of bad stuff down the road. Am I worried about it? Way more than I should be. You know, there are a lot of things that, and Linda and I used to look at each other and had a number of sayings. See, one of them was, when our ship comes in, we'll probably be at the airport. And another one was just to look and say, now, what difference does this make for the rest of our lives? And you know what? There were very few things that made a difference for the rest of our lives. And that's the learning that we are having to do. Now, why did Jesus say we should learn from him? You know, if there's one thing I'm proud of, it's my meekness. No, please don't quote me on that. But what is meekness, and why should we be celebrating it, and why do we not celebrate meekness?
To most people, it seems like you're weak.
Yeah. Seems like you're being weak to most people.
The issue is power, actually.
Okay. Expand on that.
A person who isn't meek demands power.
Mm-hmm.
A person who is meek is operating under it.
Yeah. Who is quoted in the Bible as being the meekest man on the earth?
Moses.
So, good old Moses. He was just a lapdog that rolled over for everything, right? Well, see, he had enough of a temper to murder somebody. He got in trouble with God for striking the rock when he was told to do something different. Does that sound like a meek man? So, what does it mean that Moses was the meekest man that ever lived?
He was teachable. You can't teach a proverb very much. They know it already. The meeker you are, the more teachable you are.
Okay, that's great. What else does it mean to be meek? Humble. A lot of overlap between those two words, isn't there? What?
Other-centered.
Other-centered. Remember that Moses offered for God to kill him if he would just spare the Israelites. I know very few people that would say that.
I like the way the Bible contrasted him with his,
The stiff-necked Israelites.
and in contrast, one was just up there in front, you know, and but Moses was very meek and
Yeah.
humble, you know, very mild, you know.
Somebody that was intent on doing his job, doing what God had for him to do. I cannot imagine what it must have been like to have led the Israelite who had barely any acquaintance with God. I mean, Moses, have you taken us out here into the wilderness to kill us? They completely ignored all the miracles that God had worked, the evidence of Moses leading them. I'm sick and tired of this stuff we find on the ground and then we eat, this stuff that we call, what is it? We want some meat. We need some leeks. And what was God's answer to them? They were sick from eating so much meat.
Go ahead, make my day.
And, you know, there sure are a lot of lessons that we can learn from Moses, the time in Sinai. And yet it has a bittersweet ending, doesn't it? That Moses died on Mount Nebo, overlooking the promised land, but never setting foot in it. And things worked out pretty well in the end for Moses, didn't it? You know, that
I think Moses must have been disappointed inside that he did not see the period on the end of his journey. But we have to contemplate the reason that he died.
mm-hmm. The contemporary phrase, close but no cigar. He got so close. And I'm sure this is projection of my thinking, but I think he understood quite well why he was unfit, unsuitable to go further, and accepted what God had for him. I mean, he knew why he was going up Mount Nebo. He gave a wonderful address to the Israelites before he went up. He got to see the promised land, and he got the promise of the afterlife. And the whole imagery of God and Satan fighting over who got Moses after he died. And, you know, there's some interesting things, particularly in the Old Testament. The one that starts out, consider my friend Job. And what happened to Job?
Job wished that God hadn't said, consider my friend Job.
Yeah. It's a pretty amazing story, the whole story of Job. And, we certainly can and have spent a lot of time in the past and will again in the future studying on the book of Job. Did Job have some pride? Well,
And that's what God said, you think you can create from the water? You can make the sun come up tomorrow?
yeah.
It was you and I created the world.
Yeah, but Job was a very successful, pious man before all of this happened. He was rich. He had a large family, which was considered the greatest richness. And after it all, and I have a little problem with what little it says in the Bible about it, but he was made whole afterwards. But it never does explain what happened to the kids. Yeah, so we don't know on that.
We know he prayed for his children.
Yeah.
And offered sacrifices just in case they had done something wrong. Yeah. So I'm not sure how much meek and humility Job had, but anybody that in the situation he was in that could say, though he slay me, I will trust him. That man was awfully close to God. So my yoke is easy, my burden is light. So we made it through 3 verses, kind of. I think there is still room for many more hours of study on this, but pretty well wraps up what I have prepared. And I think that there are a lot of things that we do not recognize and need to recognize each day in our life. And I guess for me, the stunning insight that I got from this is my yoke is easy, means that it was made for me and fits me and won't chafe my neck. Yes, Peter.
When we look at these verses, we can see how we fit into those verses. Those 3 imperative verbs. But I think there is something that goes beyond that. So taking the analogy of the yoking, when we come and allow ourselves to be yoked with Christ, we learn to do the task that we're supposed to be about. And in doing the task, we become reflectors of the teacher, because there are people, in this instance, looking at us, will be looking at us, and they'll see how we do the things which our master has taught us to do. And that will be something they want.
Now, I don't know if Alice, Galen, Pete have what happens to me as much as I do, but I can't go anywhere in the Brunswick area without running into people that recognize me and talk to me. And it really hit me hard one day. I was trying to get to Walla Walla, Washington for my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. And the airline that we had tickets on went on strike the night before. We showed up at 5:30 in the morning at Portland, and the other airlines would be glad to take our family out there for only an additional $3,000. I gave my dear dad a call, 5:30 minus 3, so it was 2:30 in the morning, and said, Dad, I can't find anything from Portland that I can get there. I'm going to go start heading south. I've got about an hour before I have to decide whether I'm going to Manchester or Boston. Can you see what you can do? And these were the good old days that he called the family travel agent, woke him up, and they gave me a call. He gave me a call about 45 minutes later and says, we've got a flight for you out of Boston. It's Boston, San Francisco, one, I think Seattle, and then Pasco, Washington. But we've got that for you. And so we went down there, went to check in, and the ticket agent couldn't believe it and was checking through it. And just as I was about to give him a little piece of my even smaller mind, somebody walked by. Hey, Dr. Losi, what are you doing here? God has been so gracious to me so many times to keep me from opening my mouth and saying what I was thinking. And, it is so amazing, Peter, what you say about people look to us and honor us. And I know, and I'm deeply hurt by times that I know that I have let people down, that I have not behaved in a manner befitting a child of God. That's a regret. What can I do about it? Well, I can try not to do it again. Oh yeah, the other story about my mouth almost getting me in trouble is one night my telephone was ringing and ringing, and the answering service was supposed to pick it up. And I was not on call. But at the time, my office was a wing of my house. And so, man, I finally ended up answering the phone, taking care of it. And the next morning, I was going to call the answering service and give them what for not doing their job. And then I happened to see a bit of news that there had been a fire in the restaurant just below the answering service, and how the firemen went in and had to physically pick up the chair and haul the answering service operator out. That she was dedicated to her job until those of stronger force physically removed her. Oh, I was so glad I had not called to complain.
That's where Psalm 141 verse 3 comes in perfectly, and I have to pray this for myself a lot. Set a guard over my mouth, O Lord. Keep watch over the door of my lips.
Fabulous words. It also applies to our nonverbal communication. Yeah, Jerry.
I just am overwhelmed with God's command or invitation to come. We're in a situation, we don't realize our situation is as bad as it is because we're used to it. But we have a lot to be thankful for when we come to Jesus, because there's some wonderful things in store for us. He's told us that. And it just, to me, the contrast of what's going on now in this world, where all these people coming from starving and coming to our border, and we go down and say two things: don't come. And I'm just thinking, what a contrast, that God is so willing for us to come. What an invitation. We should be very thankful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's wrap things up. And I'm also going to have special prayer. I'm very concerned for my youngest son. He and his wife live in Montana. They lived 35 miles up a gravel road in a house that they spent 3 years building, a gorgeous house. And there's a fire 3 miles upwind from them. And, they have all of their irreplaceable valuables in the car. They're under a pre-evacuation order. He has big sprinklers at the tops of the trees around his house, has pumped thousands of gallons of water into a cistern. If the fire draws near, and they're watering things down all the time, but to just put it on. And
Larry, do we have any information on Cherry and how well she did?
I am not aware of any.
It's my understanding that on Thursday she had surgery. So if you would pray for her when you close.
Okay. Father in heaven, you have promised us a yoke that fits, that's easy, that's tailored for what we need and what we can do, but only with your help. Thank you so much for that promise. Help us that we can keep claiming that promise every minute, every hour, every day of the year, so that we don't get discouraged. We'd like to ask your special blessing for Cherry that had surgery. Please help her to do well. Help her to recover. Help her to feel her love being reflected back to her and feeling you near. We also like to ask you to be with Ted, Rochelle, and little Curtis. Please keep them safe. Help them to make right decisions. In your name, amen.